Well, for the political posturing on the file, let's bring in MPs from each of the three major parties. James Bezan is for the Conservatives. He joins us on the phone from Winnipeg. Peggy Nash is with the NDP. She joins us from Toronto. Joyce Murray is holding down the Liberal chair. She's in Vancouver. All right, MPs, let's go around the table and get your take on all this. Is Stephen Harper striking the right balance, do you think, in backing NATO's resolve without committing a whole lot of new bucks to defense spending? Let's start with you, Peggy Nash.
Well, you know, certainly we should be part of an international, multinational response to the crises that are taking place around the world. With ISIS, for example, we should absolutely be supporting the humanitarian efforts and other efforts by the Americans and the French. In terms of NATO and the increase in our military spending, it's clear that military spending so far has been a record of botched procurement promises with very little results and very little commitment to our veterans when they return back home. So it's the spending that the government has already committed to has a pretty sorry record domestically, so it limits the credibility with which we can speak internationally.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the position then, Peggy. I'd quickly clarify this if you could. Is the NDP saying there should not be more money put into the military to deal with the crisis in Ukraine or Soviet aggression, or are they saying they should put more money in?
Well, absolutely. We think that we need to be part of multilateral initiatives, whether it's in Ukraine or with ISIS in Iraq, and certainly through NATO, but even outside of NATO, as in Ukraine, where we can support especially humanitarian initiatives. What I am saying and what we're saying is that the monies that they're spending now have been so lacking in transparency, so lacking in accountability, and so lacking in results. I mean, we still don't have the replacements for the F-35s. We still have problems with our ship building procurement, that it's not clear that any more money is needed.
I know. Let's keep on topic here, Peggy. Joyce Murray, Stephen Harper, should he be opening up the vault, or do you think the sort of diplomatic talk is sufficient at this point in time?
What our Prime Minister should be doing is showing leadership at NATO. That's what Canadian Prime Ministers in the past were known to do, and that is pulling people together to really advance the diplomatic and political solutions to the situation. Instead, we have what, I hate to say it, is a bunch of weasel words about budget. And the reality is that this government has reduced our spending on national defense to 1%, which is lower than Liberal prime ministers who were trying to erase a massive deficit in the 90s, and it is the lowest since the World Bank started counting this back in the 1980s. So I'd like him to explain exactly what he's doing, because he's losing the trust of Canadians, and this is essentially a decade of deception in terms of this Prime Minister and this government's relationship with military and armed forces.
Okay, interesting. James Bezan, you're on the phone somewhere in Winnipeg. Bring me on your thoughts. Are we heading for a decade of darkness, a decade of deception, or a bright, shiny light as our military goes forward?
Well, it's all kind of interesting listening to all that rhetoric coming from Joyce and Peggy. Listen, Don, the reality is that defense spending has gone up under this government by 27%. We have new planes, new aircraft. We're refurbishing ships. We have new armored vehicles and new Leopard tanks doing the job. The number of troops in uniform has increased by 5,000, military spending up by over $4 billion. So, you know, this is important compared to the decade of darkness when there was no equipment, when bases were being shut down across this country. You can go to any base across Canada right now and you're going to see new infrastructure being built, and that is supporting our troops and continuing to do so. You know, the Prime Minister has been quite clear on our commitment to NATO, and our record speaks for itself. We have been operational and contributing in a major way, both from the context of Afghanistan and Libya and what we're doing with the NATO reassurance package, and we are doing it proportionally higher than other NATO members. So we have participated. Our men and women in uniform has served us proudly, and we really do appreciate all the work that they do in protecting the interests of Canada at home and abroad.
I beg to differ a bit with you, James Bezan. And let's have a quick look at some of the NATO member defense spending comparisons. These are percentages of GDP. United States, 4.4. United Kingdom, 2.4. France, basically 2. Portugal ahead of us. Denmark's ahead of us. And Canada is at 1% of GDP. Joyce Murray, I'll go back to you quickly on this. Somewhere along the line, we're not pulling our weight in terms of what NATO says we should be. Would a Liberal government in place in another year boost spending up to 2%?
I think the key issue actually is the gap between the rhetoric of this government and what they're actually doing. And so that's the problem, is that they can't be trusted. And they can't be trusted on what their budget is. They can't be trusted on the specific numbers that they promised in 2008. To spend on military, which they were very clear, and unlike what the Prime Minister said today, they did actually talk about very specific numbers and made a promise to maintain and increase that budget, which over the last 4 to 5 years they've, through the back door, stealthily reduced. So I think it's about leadership, it's about credibility, and this Prime Minister has cost us an enormous amount of credibility on the world stage at a very time that NATO and the international community desperately needs leadership and
Don,
pulling people together,
Don,
cooperating to actually bring forward solutions to these very, very difficult challenges that are being faced by ethnic communities and
Don,
religious communities right across Europe and the Middle East.
Joyce,
Don, if I could just add, Don, if I could just add, I think that the problem for Canada is that we have a government and a Prime Minister that has essentially been speaking loudly and carrying a very small stick. The truth is that our government really has such little credibility on the international stage, and we have squandered much of the international credibility we had in terms of fostering peace, in terms of fostering diplomacy, in terms of helping to resolve international conflicts. And instead we've resorted to a great deal of rhetoric and saber rattling, and I don't think it's something where you just put a dollar figure on military spending and say that's going to fix the problem. Of course we need to be part of multilateral initiatives that help bring peace, stability, that protect sovereignty in the world, that really help foster solutions here, whether it's humanitarian aid or in some cases military aid. But I don't see this government and this Prime Minister as having the international credibility to carry that message in a respectful way internationally. And whether it's failing on environmental initiatives or failing in terms of fostering a more balanced approach on international issues, I think that's hurting us as much as the botched military procurement that we've seen so far.
All right, James Bezan, you're the Parliamentary Secretary on Defense. Are you getting any clues as to whether the government is going to reverse any of these cuts that have gone through or are planned for next year? Or do you think that they're going to go ahead on schedule and we might find we don't have enough money to finance an effort overseas?
Well, let's keep in mind here, Don, that the defense spending has increased. It increased this year by 4%. We're continuing to move forward. We don't have the operational tempo that we had with Afghanistan, which I remind you that in Afghanistan, the Liberals sent our troops there in green fatigues and without proper footwear and without proper kit, because they're still starving out the troops and refused to properly kit them out before they went into theater. But we will continue to buy the tools that we need to ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces and their members can do the job that we ask of them. So as things continue to ramp up with the difficulties that we see in the world today, in Iraq and Syria, Ukraine, the Middle East, North Africa, we'll be sure that our members and the Canadian Forces can respond to those. So we are already participating with a ship in the NATO Maritime Defense Force in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have a squadron of CF-18 fighter jets that are participating in the Baltic area, and troops on the ground in Poland as part of the reassurance measures.
All right, I want to quickly go around. That's not the only tension part of the world these days. Obviously, ISIS moving in Iraq is a concern. I want to quickly get a 30-second response from all three of you. You have 3 MPs over there, including the Foreign Affairs Minister, 1 from each party. What do you hope Canada can do while it's there meeting all these Iraq political leaders? Can anything be done from Canada's point of view? Start with you, Joyce.
Well, again, Don, it's about leadership. And to have leadership, you do need credibility. So that's what we'd like to see the Prime Minister show, and as Peggy said, end the rhetoric. But it's very disappointing to hear James talk about things that are simply not true. The record of deception over this past decade has been throughout the Prime Minister's actions, whether it's promising things in the north or whether it's not replacing
Joyce,
World War II era rifles for the Rangers. So let's have some transparency and some leadership.
All right, James Bezan. John Baird made a rare foray over there. He took 2 critics with him. What do you think Canada should be doing?
Well, I want to congratulate Minister Baird for going to Baghdad to meet with the new government and to announce $15 million in more support for security measures. That's in addition to the $21 million that we've already given for foreign aid. We're quite concerned about ISIS and how they're destabilizing the entire region, how it can become a zone that will, again, breed more terrorism. These guys are brutal. They're sadistic, and what we've seen on videos of Mr. Sotloff and other beheadings, never mind all the faceless people that have been massacred because of their ethnic religion or their ethnicity as minorities within that area. We have to continue to take a strong stand, and I'm glad that Prime Minister Stephen Harper continues to lead with a very strong, principled approach to these foreign matters.
Very short last word to you, Peggy Nash.
Thanks, Don. Well, you know, it's a very, very dangerous situation right now with ISIS, and we do support the government's humanitarian initiative and support our role with the Americans and the French, and I think we need to do whatever we can to help the civilians who are in such peril there. And also try to do whatever we can to bring some stability to, again, what is a very, very perilous situation. So it's good that we have people on the ground there.
Thank you all. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.